digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we're joined by Pete from Dubbits, Nick from Hopster, Imre from Bossa Studios, Sanj from Halician, and Fredrik from Odyssey Mobile. I'm going to let the guys explain who they are and exactly what they do, starting with Pete.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Pete. I head up a company called Dubbit, who specialise in kids entertainment. I head up the research department, and we focus primarily on helping brands create great content for kids.
And to give our listeners context, what kind of clients are you working with?
So I work with the likes of Mattel, Viacom, Time Warner, and startups like Hopster and people like that as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And Sanj, you've been here before, so we're gonna let you introduce yourself again as well.
My name's Sanj. I'm the experiential producer for a digital design creative agency called Halician. We specialise in new tech. We work with augmented reality, holographics, and we've just started with a new product that utilises tracking software, which we've developed in-house. Some of the brands we work with, so we mainly specialise within luxury and fashion. So our biggest client is LVMH. So we work with quite a few of the brands, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, Dom Perignon. But we also work with quite a few artists as well. So we're working with The Unseen on the colour changing dress. And we've just started working with an artist called Helen Story to develop a dress that changes colour depending on the pollution levels in different cities.
Okay, and because I always bug you to do this every time, go on, you know what I'm going to ask you.
So I've worked within digital for about 15 years now, traditionally worked within the music sector for a long time, and one of the biggest projects that I worked on, which at the time broke the internet, was the Tupac hologram at Coachella back in 2012.
Okay, I feel satisfied now you said it. Hi, Fredrik. So, Fredrik from Odyssey, why don't you tell us what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Fredrik. I'm one of the co-founders of Odyssey Mobile, a full-service mobile advertising network. I also run sales for both Funware Advertising and Odyssey Mobile globally. We provide big international brands with an end-to-end solution for mobile advertising that goes from creative, publishing development, and everything network related. We work with brands like Burberry, Lexus, Microsoft, to name a few.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, and Imre, why don't you explain to us what you do?
Hi, I'm Imre. I'm one of the founders of Bossa Studios, and we make video games.
That was short and sweet. Why don't you tell us which video games you make?
All the awesome ones.
What about a little game called I Am Bread?
We did a bunch of comedy games, which we are probably most known for. One is about surgery, because we thought, what's funnier than a heart transplant? And another one is about a slice of bread. And
because
these are
everybody wants to be a slice of bread.
Indeed. And this is an epic journey of a slice of bread who wants to become toast. And so we make those kind of games. And we're also started working on cross-media, making games which are closely attached to film and telly.
Wonderful. And Nick, why don't you explain to us what you do at Hopster?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Nick. I'm one of the founders at Hopster. Hopster is the app that helps kids learn through the shows they love. So we're basically a new type of video and learning platform for kids aged between 2 and 6. So we're basically all about taking kind of the core of what kids get from TV, like really great TV shows like Thomas the Tank Engine and Bob the Builder and Ben and Holly's Little Kingdom, but then serving those up in apps for connected devices, for your tablet, for your mobile, for your connected TV, and then building a whole series of learning games around those shows. So basically we're all about kind of making screen time a win for both parents and kids, and making the experience for kids much more interactive and learning and stimulating than just being sat passively in front of the TV.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today, guys. So let's talk about the future for mobile. At the moment, we're seeing this really interesting emerging trend for the future of mobile. We know that kids now are using devices in a very cross-platform kind of way when it comes to the type of IP that they're interacting with. Kids don't really care where they see it anymore. They expect to be able to pick up whatever device they start off with, move through a number of different devices and still continue to have a seamless experience. And I'm curious from your perspective, Nick, obviously you're working with this kind of experience with something like Hopster, that they can watch that on their smart TV, they can move that to mobile, they can move that to tablet. And from a child's perspective, or certainly a young person's perspective, there is a certain expectation that it really doesn't matter what the device is, they're still going to be able to see that same content. So what do you think are the key influences at this point for the way that people are going to, or children are going to expect to be able to interact with this kind of experience?
Yeah, I think you're definitely seeing like the world of kind of, that used to be a kid's whole world, which is basically the TV, shifting and changing into a much more fragmented, multi-device world. And there used to be this kind of discussion about is there always going to be a place for linear TV? Will kids always be spending a certain amount of time in front of the TV set? And I think that debate is kind of coming to an end. I mean, it's fairly clear that the future for what kids expect to do is like multi-device, on-demand, delivered over the internet. Within that, though, there are certain things that are common. If you care about great shows, you care about great shows. It's important to have really good shows. But some of the fundamental things that went into putting together a really great TV channel do translate. You want, as I said, you want great shows. You also want to think about the kind of the experience you're creating and the quality of the brand. You want like a distinctive brand. You want the creative and the experience around the service that you're creating to be strong. But I do think it's really, there are lots of things that are different as well. For us, we're not just about great video, we're also about interactivity. And I think one of the great things about creating stuff for kids is because they don't come with preconceptions, there's really, you don't have to break down that barrier of, is this a TV channel, or is this an app, or is this a game, or is this a toy? Kids come looking to be entertained, looking for cool stuff. And provided you can do that well in a way that kind of fits the device that you're on and makes use of the unique stuff you can do on a tablet, touch it, pick it up and tap it and squeeze it, then I think you'll find success.
Okay, so you can't see it, but there's a lot of nodding going on in this room right now. So I'm going to ask you this, Fredrik, from your perspective with Odyssey, from an advertising perspective, it's obvious that there is a shift in the way that people expect to be communicated and expect to see the articulation of brand on a mobile device. What do you think are the key trends that are emerging with advertising?
I think it's definitely to create the ads and the content for the device that we're displaying it on. The amount of times I've been sitting with clients or with creative agencies in particular where they said, we're just going to put our print ad on a tablet and it's going to work really well. Just doesn't really work anymore. So what the user is expecting is a customized experience, because they know they need to experience advertising or to get all the free content they need, but it needs to be tailored for the device, it needs to be tailored for the content that they're consuming, it needs to be tailored for the user as well. So what we've done, for example, when we promoted kids films or kids shows, is to build a little game within the app, within the ad. So it could be a little puzzle that, again, kind of unlocks content, so it gives a little bit of a gamification side of things. It could be that we tilt your phone from landscape to portrait to pour something out, which we did for another film that we promoted. So I think it's making the advertising more personalised and more tailored to what device you're on at that particular time.
You mentioned there about agencies, and Sanj, this is probably a really good point for you in terms of one of the things that I think is quite interesting with mobile advertising now is this notion of content development as a storytelling or narrative. It's no longer just show me something flashy and push an advertising message at me. It's more about tell me a story and give me an experience. And you see a lot of that, certainly with some of your high-end brands. And I'm curious from your perspective what you see emerging in terms of these narrative storytelling experiences.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting question. From our experience at Halition, especially over the last 6 years, there's been a kind of evolution in how the brands that we work with communicate the provenant narrative that they have. Initially, they thought, as some of us have mentioned, that mobile was going to take over. It was going to kill everything else, and everything was going to change. And things have changed dramatically, but they've changed in ways that are, that they haven't expected. And what we've really had to do is educate these clients in a way so that they understand what it is that they have to do and how to communicate these narratives. Because the most important thing in any volition is the narrative, especially whether it's advertising or whether it's storytelling. If the narrative's not good, if the concept isn't exciting, if it's not compelling, then it's not going to go anywhere. And we can talk about that from the 80s. I guess there were times when you'd watch a film and then you would you would love that film so much that you would buy the computer game on ZX Spectrum or Amstrad or whatever it was.
Showing your age, Sam.
Yeah, and it would never, unless the playability was really complex, it would never really resonate the same way that story did. And where we are now is, the future's here. There's so many avenues and platforms and visual media devices. Whether they're touchscreens, whether they're handheld device, whether it's a watch, whether it's clothing, that allow you to communicate, with a brand or with a story or with a concept. And I think it's an exciting space, but it's taken us a long time to get there.
It's definitely something though that I think we're beginning to see more and more of a kind of a speed in the way that we're moving towards these things. And I think one of the interesting areas that we're seeing a lot of movement right now is in VR technology. We've seen a lot of money invested into VR. And there's this interesting kind of question, I suppose, that's being posed right now in terms of the differences between having a VR experience for gaming versus a VR narrative storytelling experience for film. And from your perspective, Imre, obviously you're working with IP that is what some might call as transmedia or cross-platform, is traversing these different platforms and utilising storytelling in different ways, in different narrative formats. What would you consider as some of the key challenges for you?
I think what was said earlier is that this new generation doesn't really care. When I was young, it was a very specific thing that you almost chose a platform, and then on that platform you chose your content. Whilst now I chose a content and then I find it and I demand it on every single platform and I want to be in charge. Obviously, I am in video games, so I'm always going to say that is the greatest because obviously there is interaction.
You're not biased.
Absolutely not, because there is interaction there. So it's a very powerful relationship. When it goes to different platforms, what we are finding is that people care less and less. In fact, when we do research, there is very clear divides of, I would say, people above 30, 35 and contrasting to someone who is like 20, 25 and under. Very different. For that separation is that someone is saying, oh, wow, it exists on VR as well. I didn't expect. And an under 25 saying, yeah, sure, I love the brand. I don't care whatever the platform I'm interacting with. And for us, because we take our brands in every single platform we can find, for example, Surgeon Simulator is available on phones and tablets and computers and consoles and VR and everything. There is that huge divide that someone who is a fan and under 25, they're just going to pick it up anywhere and they don't care. For them, it's not that exciting because it's natural that it is going to be everywhere. It's kind of like expected. So, as a content creator, we just have to get over that, or those biases, because obviously the creators of the content often in that other age range. So we are thinking of separate experiences. We have to get over that. The good news is that technology caught up. Back in the 90s, VR was a nightmare. And today, within the next year, we are going to have at least 3 or 4 very stable device with extremely good supporting technology. And it's going to be much more easier to create content.
Indeed. Pete, if I recall rightly, Dubbit has something called We Are VR. Tell us about We Are VR.
So We Are VR is the App Store for virtual reality, and we set that about 1.5 years ago, and we did a lot of research into VR. I was a non-believer to start with. I wasn't convinced by it, but we've seen the acceleration now. So looking at young people, we're finding lots of traffic on there is from young people trying to find VR content. So that's doing really well now, promoting VR games, products, videos and everything else.
So from your perspective, in terms of what young people are expecting and what the data shows in terms of those behaviours, Imre's talking about this assumption for people under a certain age that they're just going to find the brand wherever, in whatever format. Do you think there are any dangers inherent in that assumption from young people? Because we as content creators and we as platform makers aren't necessarily on the same page as that generation. So what would you consider as the inherent danger there?
I think there's probably two things. So when we track how kids consume media and find media and track advertising, effectiveness of advertising, that used to be a lot easier than it is today because it was in distinct pots. But now it's so varied how kids and young people and parents find out about things that what we see now is it's becoming increasingly hard to discover new content. So some of the existing brands perform really strongly because you know where they are, you know how to find them, you know the schedule. So actually, this digital anywhere, everywhere is probably only been the last 2 years where you've been able to produce a business that's really profitable on a tablet and a mobile for this age range, because it's only just been now that kids will find it. Parents think it's valuable enough for kids to use it. And now you have a market that wants content everywhere, anywhere, and kids are becoming a lot smarter at finding things. So if we ask a kid to find their favourite TV show, now they'll pick up a tablet before they pick up a TV remote, because a tablet is easier for them to use. A swipe is easier than a click. So, it's just starting to change, really, I think. Okay. So, from your perspective, Nick, obviously discoverability is one of those really interesting issues for certainly for the next generation, the digital new generation. And I suppose from your point of view with Hopster, you have a lot of experience with discoverability in different mediums and different formats.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one of the great things about creating content in digital is it's got faster, it's got quite cheaper. Making an app even a really high-end app is an awful lot cheaper than making like 52 episodes of a top-end TV show. But part of the flip side of that is a lot more people do it. So you suddenly have this explosion of choice, which at one level is great for users, but actually one of the things we hear from parents is it can get quite overwhelming. Like, how do you know what's good? And certainly for producers, it can be quite tricky, because you've got to try and get cut through, you've got to help people find your stuff. And suddenly you don't just have to be a content creator, you have to be a user acquisition marketing organization as well to actually get cut through. So, I mean, our approach at Hopster is basically trying to build a brand from the ground up. We're unusual as an app for kids in that we're a subscription app. So we kind of deliberately made that decision that we wanted to be a place that people would come back to time and time again. We thought it was worth going through the hard yards of trying to build a subscription business rather than just doing the normal thing in the App Store of one-off transactional payment or in-app ads. And I think where I think I see probably the App Store going quite a lot of new emerging digital technologies is you will start to see new platforms growing up that kind of help curate the experience for users. So, for Hopster, we bring in, it's not just video and games that we create ourselves. We license video from other people. We bring games from other people. I could well imagine in VR, you start over time, you find like VR portals that help you find the best VR material. And I think you're going to see a whole generation of kind of brands that help users navigate through new technology and kind of get to the right level of aggregation. I think that's one to really look out for over the next 4 or 5 years.
Interesting. You mentioned there about this notion of an app future, and bearing in mind that Hopster is now on smart TV, so it's on Apple TV, for example, and we know that Apple TV are looking at a future that involves apps as a launch pad for content and also for gaming. I'm curious from your perspective, Imre, obviously you've got this background in gaming, and traditionally discoverability for gaming is, we've known for a long time that places like the App Store are oversaturated, and we've known for a long time that the challenge of discoverability and being able to bubble up to the surface of a platform like the App Store is always going to be a challenge. Do you think that there are any new opportunities for these content creators that are more TV based than necessarily game based in that context?
Wow, that is a big question. I think everyone agrees that the biggest tragedy is not when something which is bad fails. The tragedy is when something which is great and it has an audience who will be willing to pay, yet they never meet that audience and that product. And And I think the focus here is what we've just heard about curation. Because beforehand, even if you had a couple of 100 TV channels, let's be honest, you were sticking with your 5-6 favorites, and that was your curation. You knew that if you turned onto that channel which you really liked, you could expect about 8 o'clock a film being there which you're going to enjoy. And that disappeared with this huge amount of content coming in, and that's the same true for apps and video content. But what we are finding in all of these, that new tribes are being formed where people follow either a brand or an identity, and they say that becomes my next curation. The obvious example is PewDiePie, for example. He is the biggest YouTuber for a reason, and he has this army of fans who will follow his advice. If he says this game is great, those people will buy it. Reaching out to his audience, if he will cover your game, or if he cover, I'm hoping at some point he will start doing videos about other stuff as well, not just games. I am sure that his clan basically will follow, and he becomes the Discovery channel. Similarly, how your favorite TV channel was, now these figureheads or brands or services like yours will be the one where people find that content what they want to do. And the same is going to be true for video content, for games, for apps, for whatever. One clan is Netflix. That is a clan. Hopstar is a clan. Fans of PewDiePie is a clan. Hopefully fans of Bossa Studio is a clan. But that's going to be the future of content discovery.
It's interesting there, because what you're really talking about is social peer-to-peer curation, if you like. And in that context, it's interesting for me to hear from you, Fredrik, where you think your future lies, if the future is really going to be peer-to-peer influencing versus necessarily paid advertising or traditional advertising models that you're used to.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely challenges ahead for traditional paid advertising, but again, I don't think it will ever disappear, because even to this point, someone like a PewDiePie has an advertising funded model where some of the games that he promotes, he gets paid for. So again, there's networks within that YouTube community that actually then makes a lot of money out of advertising. But again, it's more than personalized, and it being endorsed by a champion or the champion of a clan, for example. So there's just something that we as advertising executives, we need just to find new avenues to get our content out to the user. It could also be looking at it from a more native perspective. So one thing we're currently doing, or just finished with Mission Impossible 5, was actually to run a traditional, normal film advertising campaign, which is generating a lot of video views. But we also worked with 2 game developers where we actually integrated and built an MI5 game level within the game. So I actually brought Ethan Hunt and the consortium into the game, and it was 2 racing games, and a key scene in the film is a bike racing scene. So again, to mirror kind of the environment, we know a large portion of our potential audience is within 2 existing games, but then bringing them some exciting content. So again, finding those kind of new advertising models, which are more native and more integrated, personalized and relevant, I think is where we need to go. Okay.
And from your point of view, Sanj, what's your perspective on that?
I mean, I guess it goes back to the narrative. Again, it's, that's the most important thing. And, just going on about, we're talking about these tribes that are communicating with these different brands or different narratives. Now there's, people are starting to get metrics and facts and figures about, how people are socializing with these concepts. But there's still a huge aspect of this society that is still engaging with brands through dark social. When I talk about dark social, I mean, the things that can't be validated, can't be listed, can't be, where there's no data. And we're talking about advertising here. Well, advertising is never going to go away. People, brands need to communicate their message through advertising, and that could be through mobile, that could be through a game, that could be through an experience, etc. That's not going to change. The key is the narrative. Is the narrative compelling enough for someone to listen and go, actually, I want to invest some of my time, whether it's listening or watching, or is it going to be terrible? And there's lots terrible narratives out there. You know?
I think the words that springs to mind when you're saying that is authentic. Is the narrative authentic enough to really resonate with this audience?
Absolutely. And to put things in perspective, so last week I was at the Frankfurt Motor Show, and this is massive. They've got, each hall is about the size of a football pitch. They have about 13 halls. It's pretty fucking huge. But every brand had VR, every brand had touch tables, every brand had spent 20 million pounds on LED. And again, there was some really good stuff and there was a lot of crap stuff.
Okay.
An example, and this is going to sound a bit gross, someone was using the VR headset, and then a few seconds later they took their VR headset, they looked a bit green, and they started throwing up. And that's an issue. I think at the moment technology is there's a gimmicky aspect to technology, and there's a lot of brands just assume that technology is the answer. But without good narrative, without good curation, without quality storytelling,
because
it's
the
nothing.
user experience.
Yeah, then it's nothing.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. So as part of every digital jam session, we always ask the question, what we think is the most significant trend, change, technology innovation that we think is going to change the industry or the landscape for us within the next 5 to 10 years. Now, because you've been on the show before, Pete, I'm going to start with you.
So with kids and young people, it's creativity. So it's the fact that digital allows them to become immersed in that piece of content and actually go on to create things. And that, for us, is just a huge growth area. And I think one of the things that everyone here said is making sure that things are digitally and native to that platform. And I think as people are actually getting that and producing, getting that and making more native content, kids feel it's authentic, therefore they become more immersed in it and they're more inspired to be creative. So I think creative products on digital for kids will explode.
Okay. Imre, you've been here before, so I'm going to say, give us your thoughts.
In the next 24 months, we're going to see some amazing new technologies coming out, not just VR, but AR and some other things. But I don't think that's going to be it. What it is going to be is, and I'm going to echo what you said about the narrative, is when companies realize that is what matters, and then realize that the technology comes second. And instead of becoming a gimmick of, look, we did VR, it becomes that we have this extremely powerful message, which we are going to deliver interactive, VR, web, whatever is the format necessary. And that started that process. In my domain, this means game companies learning from television and film and television learning from game and creating something together.
Okay. Sanj, you've been here before?
Yeah, so I guess just wanted to talk about VR because this year is VR has been the buzzword. There's lots of brands utilising it. There's been some really good, innovative and exciting initiatives that have taken place. I think a lot of the people that are working with it at the moment, who are investing a lot of money in it, are really starting to understand the psychology of being in that environment. Because, for example, car companies, you put on a headset, it kind of feels like you're in a car, but if your body's not getting those G's that make you feel like you're in a car, you're going to feel really uncomfortable. And that's going to change. And also the lag is going to change, and also the quality of the visuals that are being developed at the moment is going to get better.
And also controllers.
Yeah, and the controllers, but there's still a long way to go. There's still there's a lot of people who are trying to push with a standardized format, and they're just not getting there. And I think the people that are developing this technology need to collaborate more and work together and find all the best things that they're working with and use that to channel and standardize that platform.
Okay. So, Fredrik.
So I'm going to echo some of the things that have been said before. So I think, again, as I said, content and narrative would definitely be more and more important, especially for the younger generation, because they are more savvy than we were, and so the narrative needs to be there. If I look at what is going to be a significant game changer for the next 5-10 years, purely from an advertising perspective, I see the TV OS that Apple just launched and Android TV. Their kind of software platforms and how they are now going to be implemented across every single TV manufacturer. That's obviously Android's goal, because at the moment TV eats up the largest chunk of the advertising pie. That's always been the case, and it will be the case moving forward. However, with the new OS is coming through, TV will not look the same in 5 years, 10 years that it does now. There will be live events like the Rugby World Cup, Football World Cup, these kind of things, which will be broadcast live and people need to see it on screens. But when I come home and put on Dave at 10 o'clock to watch Suits, that's not going to be the case moving forward. So with these new OSs, we need to find new advertising models to actually kind of adapt ourselves to their ecosystem.
Okay, Nick, what's your thoughts on this?
If we're talking 10 years, I'm actually fascinated by artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Like, I think, so I mean, over the next 2 years, I think it's mobile and touchscreen. I think we're right at the start of seeing how that kind of transforms. I think there's loads of stuff still to play out there. I think that's all kind of running and it's happening. But over 10 years, I think artificial intelligence is fascinating. I think it's getting more and more capable. I think as it gets more capable and it gets cheaper, more and more people will start to use it. And we talked about storytelling, and I think storytelling is important, but I could imagine some really cool stuff where you sit down and have a conversation with Peppa Pig rather than have Peppa Pig tell you a story. And I can name at least 1 or 2 kids who would think that would be pretty damn cool.
I'm pretty sure you're probably right. Okay, well, we like to let our listeners have a way to be able to track you down, follow you, stalk you, hound you. So, on that basis, if you would be so good as to share with us your social media handle of choice, Pete.
Mine's Twitter. It's Peter Robinson 81.
And Nick.
Twitter at NickBRW.
Imre?
Also Twitter, and it's Imrejele, IMREJELE.
And Sanj?
Twitter, Sanj, SANJ, Surati, SURATI.
And Fredrik?
Yeah, Twitter as well, at Borestrom, BORESTROM.
Now, what does that say all about all of us that we don't want to share our Twitter handle?
Can't make Snapchat work properly.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, guys, and thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe and review. And thanks again for joining us on this Digital Jam session. DigitalJamSessions.com